911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. All right, so welcome back to Dispatched Dysfunctional. This one feels a little bit different for me because we spend a lot of time telling first responders to ask for help, but we don't talk about enough what keeps them silent until the damage is already done. Today's guest is Darren Richardson. Before the titles, credentials, coaching, and all the polished internet stuff, Darren, who are you and what made this conversation saying yes to? Blarg.
Yeah, no, at first, I'm a father and I'm a husband. Father to two daughters, and former firefighter, paramedic, also a two-time amputee.
Wow.
And so, yeah, not many people know that, but yeah, I had a amputation actually when I was a kid. I was 13. I had a boulder the size of a car fall on me, and so that kind of introduced me to EMS in a weird roundabout sort of way.
Way of looking at it?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, kind of crazy. I don't know if you're going to jump in on that right away, but that's who I am, is a former firefighter, former paramedic. I've been out of the fire service 9 years now, left due to PTSD, and then worked some odd jobs after that, but tried getting back into the fire service, and roundabout weird sort of way, as my second amputation prevented that. And now I'm a coach and motivational speaker as well.
That's awesome that you grew from the challenges too. You know, that's amazing right there.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
that shows the type of person you are. You're not one to just lay down there and take it. You're one that's gonna get your ass back up. You're gonna get back up and you're gonna show it. Hey, look, I'm your boss. You ain't mine.
Right,
Oh.
right. And that's kind of how I've always, honestly, man, that's how I've grown up. Um, since I can remember, is just kind of get up, dust the dirt off, don't lay down. And it kind of proved it. When I was a kid, also, like, grew up, single mom, three boys. My dad was an alcoholic, wasn't around very much. And so we really couldn't rely on that. So I kind of had to step up and be the bigger one. And that's really, I think, where I got some of that resilience, honestly. Um, and then, yeah, when I was 13, I'll jump into that real
Yeah,
quick.
I'm kind of curious on that one.
Yeah. I feel like I've been bouncing around, and at least let me set that straight. So
You're a
yeah,
medic. I'm a medic. That's usually how our brain works.
right. uh, yeah. So I was 13 years old. I was hiking around a lake with a buddy of mine. At the time, we were really into rock climbing. This was a small town in the mountains out in California. So in the early 90s, 1993. So hiking around a lake, screwing around, we decided we wanted to go off trail and just climb some rocks, screw around like boys do, right? And I was hiking up a kind of a boulder field, a steep embankment, um, to go to these little cliffs, and kind of stopped up on a ledge. And right above me, there was a big slab, taller than me. It was about the size of a small car. Broke loose, fell. Luckily, I was able to move enough out of the way, but it got my foot, so it completely crushed my foot and continued rolling down. Luckily, continued rolling down the hill. So I was right underneath it. It broke loose, kind of saw it moving, and just didn't move enough. But I wasn't pinned, which was incredible, and then only got my foot. But that started the cascade of getting help. There were no cell phones at that time, right? And so my buddy had to run. It was probably about a half mile down the hillside, down the trail to get help. Um, where there was some other families around, including his family at this lake that they were all hanging out at. So someone had to jump in a car, drive about 15 minutes down to the next lake where there was a bait shop that had a phone
Jeez.
and call 911. And so out there was volunteer fire. The ambulance was actually a full-time ambulance. So that was kind of lucky. But they had to call search and rescue out as well, just because now it was considered, it was a low angle rescue, is basically what it was considered. And so that rescue took about 4 hours. The Luckily, as my buddy was running down when he hit the trail, there was a couple there who stopped and helped. They ran up. He happened to be a dentist, so a little bit about some medical training. He kind of knew what to do. So he ran up and got to me. At that point, I had removed my shoe, and the another dumb part of this is we were at the lake playing, so I had like water shoes on. So zero protection, no support, nothing, right? So it basically just destroyed those shoes. Um, so I was sitting there, pulled the shoe off to see what would happen, and it was just a mangled bag of bones, right? Blood everywhere. Um, Two of the toes had been completely severed off. And so I just kind of sat down, actually took my shirt off and started tying my shirt around my leg, thinking, oh, I got to stop bleeding. I'm a kid. I don't know really what to do. And when that dentist got there, he pulled his belt off, put a tourniquet on, and I'm convinced that's what saved my leg. Um, at that point, and then it was just wait for rescue. So that that took about 4 hours before I was down at the hospital, and it was the local hospital in the small town, and um, they didn't fly me out. It was actually really lucky again. There was a trauma surgeon who had from like San Diego area. He had luckily uh, just flown in to do uh, surgery. He was an orthopedic surgeon that did trauma as well. So he flew in to do someone else's surgery. They got kicked out. I went in, and um, at that point, he was debating. He said, most likely we're going to take the leg below the knee. And initially, that's what the plan was. He decided in surgery that, no, I want to see what's going on, what we can do. So he just pinned the foot back together as best he could. So I ended up just getting 3 big pins. The first 2 toes, the big toe and the second toe, were pinned back on, and then a pin put right through the side
Wow.
of the foot to kind of hold it together. And it was, let's just wait and see what happens. Was his concept, right?
Well, sounds like
It actually, honestly, worked pretty well. The end of the day, it was about 2 weeks later. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. About 2 weeks into it, I started getting an infection. The first 2 toes died. So they were worried about gangrene, and they just said, nope, surgery. We're going to take 2 toes off, and do all the skin grafting. So at that point, I didn't have any skin on the top of my foot. So they had to do lots of skin grafting. And basically, the end of the day is I lost 2 toes. So pretty lucky. Right before that, it was going to be below my knee. And so I lived that way for 32 years.
wow.
As that was my amputation. So it really, it slowed me down a little. But at that point, I learned a big lesson in resilience, right? The surgeons, the doctors, physical therapists, they all agreed that, like, you're going to walk with a limp the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to rock climb again. I lived in a ski town, so I skied a lot. I actually competed racing. They said, it's going to be a couple of years before you get your foot in a ski boot. And I challenged it all. And actually 3 months after that injury, I was out rock climbing again. one of the physical therapists was really cool. He's like, let's do it. Let's get you ready. And so it was learning that hard work and resilience and getting back up. And so that, 3 months later, I was in a modified shoe. I basically cut a shoe up, taped it where it needed to be, and climbed with my heel because my heel wasn't hurt. Right. So, that kind of that fireman engineering brain, like, well, if this doesn't work, I'll just modify it this way. And so that got me, growing up and pretty resilient. So that's as I went to college. And right after college, I decided I wanted to be a firefighter, paramedic. So I went that road and did that for, I had 18 years in EMS total, 14 in fire. And loved it. Loved every minute of it.
Can you settle the debate? Which one's better, EMS or fire?
Fire. But I was I loved being a paramedic. I did for most of it. I started getting the burnout of medicine. I think doing it a long time, it kind of wears on you. But I was in a really busy area. I was in the Denver, Colorado area. One of the busiest. It was the department was just south of Denver proper, but we were a busy department. South of that, actually, area like Littleton, Highlands Ranch, Parker area. If you know that area, yeah. Good. Yeah, I was at a busy firehouse for most of the time on a medic transport unit most of the time. So we kind of, you get busy, you get long shifts, and the burnout started happening a little bit. And, a handful of rough calls over that time. 18 years in that world is, it wears on you. You can only kind of handle so much. And I think it probably brought out some past kid trauma as well, dealing with the foot stuff. My alcoholic father, stuff like that, was buried in there deep. And over a long period of time, it wasn't enjoyable anymore. I started, I had a handful of really bad kid calls, and that just kind of tore me up. I have young kids as we started our family, and I didn't, my wife's an ER nurse. And so we kind of had that common, right? It's either fireman or, it's, you're married to a nurse or a teacher, right? for most of it. Right. So we noticed we were bringing work home a little bit, and to protect each other, like we totally did it wrong. Like I didn't tell her about my day. She didn't tell me about her day. And then our communication just started going downhill. Alcohol, I kind of hit alcohol too hard over a while, and decided after 14 years, just running those terrible calls, that I didn't know, which was really funny. I didn't know I had PTSD. Right. And I had patients. I'd worked, I had several like veterans. I knew what it was. I didn't look in the mirror, man. I was too proud and didn't realize it truly what it was. And it was affecting my life. So we decided to give that life up. I left the fire service. My wife got a really good job in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so we decided to relocate. Our kids were still young at that time, and thought it's easier to move kids when they're younger than, when they're teenagers and hate you. So, so we moved so we moved to Coeur d'Alene, and I worked odd jobs. I did handyman work. I built wood boats for a while. I did a whole bunch of things, but realized I was still pretty unhappy, and I thought I was running to something better. And when I really look in the mirror, I was running away from my problems. Right? I thought, oh, I'm out of the fire service. I'm not going to see this again. I'll be fine. So I spent probably 2 years kind of suffering and drinking and just going down that road, man. It's that dark road. And finally just kind of had a moment. I was reading a fire engineering magazine, actually, and there was a PTSD quiz in it.
Oh, okay.
And like, oh, got nothing to do. I'll take it. And I hit every single red flag on
Damn.
that. On
Okay.
it. And so that, man, that opened my eyes, right? And to where, so I started, again, I can fix this. I can do it on my own. And like every mistake, man, totally every mistake. But I started listening to podcasts on it, searching for podcasts, and found a really good one that I enjoyed. But he kept referring to, like, you need to get help. This is a podcast for, awareness, but if you're listening, you're feeling these things, get help. Right. So as I'm listening to these and watching my family grow away from me, I mean, my family was ready to leave. And so true rock bottom. Luckily they didn't, but I went and scheduled an appointment for a therapist. And I looked up because, I wanted the best. Right. So I found one. She's incredible. She deals with first responders and veterans and does EMDR as the therapy that I did. And it worked great for me. And
Wonders about that.
yeah, it was great. It took me a while because we worked through it on the firefighting stuff, and then she kind of set me free. And about a month later, I called back and said, "No, I'm not quite there yet." And so we dove in at that point with my foot, and the combination of the fire, EMS, and then my foot opened up Pandora's box, and that opened up a lot of other things, because with EMDR, it can open up other things, right? Which is good, because I had a ton of stuff down there and buried, and it opened that up. We talked about younger childhood, my alcoholic father, all of this. Um, so I did therapy off and on for quite a while, over a year, with this, and man, it was great. After that, usually it's only a few months, but um, I had a lot, I guess, and I feel great now. It opened the light, it opened the doors. Everything's been great since, and yeah. So I was actually at that point feeling good, not enjoying the job that I was doing, and decided I wanted to test to get back in the fire service.
That's awesome.
So I started training. At that point, it was a few years ago. So I was 45 years old, or 44, when I started training in testing for local departments out here in Washington and Idaho, and just being that much older than typical recruits in their early 20s. I'm literally twice their age, so I know what it's like to get through a fire academy. I know what it's like to get through your probe year. I started just working out really hard. I started going to a CrossFit gym again, just hitting it hard. And by doing that, I noticed more and more pain in my foot over time. And they had told me, years down the road, there's a chance we'll have to remove your remaining toes. You're going to have arthritis, all of that. And I just kept training through the pain for a while till it got a little much. So I went and saw a surgeon, and I was okay. Like, let's take these toes off. I'm training, I'm testing. And he said, well, it's not that simple. We did some x-rays. Because of the extensive damage from the previous injury and arthritis and tons of scar tissue and just overuse, he said, no, we're actually going to have to remove half of your foot, not just the toes. The bone heads actually started degrading, the remaining bone heads. So he's basically, the way he described it is like you're walking on gravel, and it's not going to last much longer. So we have option A is to leave it, and you just kind of go through, and we build you footbeds and see how you do. Option B was a transmetatarsal amputation. So half the foot. So it's actually 2 inches behind the toes into the foot. And option 3 was a below the knee amputation if that didn't work. So we decided on a transmetatarsal, which I had just over a year, actually 16 months ago, which, I was good with it. I was okay with it. I spoke with prosthetic specialists, a prosthetist who builds prosthetics. We kind of worked it out and figured out something for me because I'm pretty active. This type of amputation is typically, it's not from trauma. It's usually from infection or diabetes, neuropathies. So people that get this are much older in life. They're not as active. So there are some downsides to this type of amputation. They're basically, you're cutting the bone halfway, so they're sharp bone ends sticking out. So he's like, you're limited to, you can never stand on your toes because they're going to poke right through the skin, right? Or you don't have toes, but you can't stand up,
Right.
on that. So he built me. So we actually discussed the pros and cons of the transmetatarsal amputation and also a below the knee. And what's better? Obviously, I want to keep my foot. I don't want to deal with the headaches of below the knee. But he actually said it's more efficient, and people do better with a below the knee amputation. Younger people.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of crazy too, right? He says statistics kind of show. He said, in the surgeon, I'm a different kind of case. And he's like, you're that 1% that they're confident, you'll do well with it. But a transmetatarsal amputation is actually considered a transient amputation or a temporary amputation, which I thought was crazy. He said most people that get that eventually over time still have to go below the knee. Yeah. So I've learned a ton in this arena, but the thing about that, if I just went to a below a knee, he's like, you can't go back either. You can't put it back on. So with that being said, I opted last year for a transmet amputation. Rehabbed it, did very well. They told me it was going to be a year recovery. I told myself it was going to be 6 months, and just like, you don't know me, I'm gonna make it. And actually, within 3 months, I went wake surfing and mountain biking. Like 5 months later, and so completely healed in 6 months.
Wow.
And I attribute that to kind of the upbringing, but also like the fire service. Just kind of getting out there and doing it, and that kind of mindset.
Right.
Yeah. And again, they even told me, they're like, I was told by a couple of the professionals again, you're never going to run again with this amputation. You can't get up on your toe. You have no spring, you have no lever, so you can't run. He said surfing is going to be next to impossible if you can do that. So I guess just, you don't have the platform. Like,
Makes
well,
sense.
again, I'm out to prove you wrong. I respect your decision. And I mean, again, my surgeon was
respectfully
incredible.
disagree with you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like my prosthetist, I got real lucky with the surgeon and the prosthetist. They're incredible. And so my hat's off to them. They did a great job. The prosthetist actually, when we started working on my prosthetic, it's like, how active are you? He was on the American Ninja Warrior show.
Well,
So
that's fucking awesome.
right. So like, I'm working with you because you know what I need, and I think that's just cool, right? So
And
so
an American Ninja Warrior, that's even better. That's awesome.
Right. So he knows what athletes need, right? I'm like, well, consider me, consider me an athlete. I'm not, but consider me one. I want to be able to do that stuff. So yeah. And that's kind of my road to there. And really after that, after my rehabbing, it kind of dawned on me that, you know what, now I've gone through 2 amputations, I've gone through PTSD. Maybe I have a bigger calling, right? And I think at that point I was like, you know what, I need to tell my story. I need to I want to coach people through this, um, especially. And so my whole realm now is uh, coaching people to overcome their challenges, right, through mindset, resilience, mental performance, but specifically um, first responders, veterans, and amputees, because I have lived experience in 2 of those 3 fields, right? Like, and I think that goes a long way, like I feel like you really have to walk in those shoes to to be able to coach someone. People are going to follow you if they've done it, right? You're not going to trust a fire officer who only read a book on it, right? You're going to trust the guy that's been in been in those fires, been in that world, right? That's the guy you trust. Not the chief that took a bunch of tests and went up went up the ranks through, you know, another realm. He's good at his job, but he's not good on the fire ground per se, right? So
Yeah, that makes sense. And that all ties into this, and on the form I have everyone fill out, you put silence can cost everything. And you kind of covered that a
yeah,
minute ago.
yeah,
So when did you first realize you weren't just carrying the stress home from the job, you were losing pieces of yourself?
yeah.
I know you covered a little bit, but
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Let's dive into that. I, s- I really just noticed change when I was still in the fire service. Started getting, my temper got shorter. I was more bitter with my wife and kids. I wasn't as patient as I should have been. Um, at work, when you're surrounded by a firehouse full of 6, 7, 8 people, right? There's always laughing. There's always fun. You're busting each other's balls all day long, right? Um, so I didn't really notice it then, but when I would come home, I would sometimes still act that way for a little while. My wife would constantly remind me, like, you're not at the firehouse. Your 2-year-old daughter's in the kitchen. Please stop dropping the F bomb. you know, uh, yeah, right. And so I, but I at that time I would also, I mean, it's exhausting being up all night in a busy firehouse on a busy medic unit, running all those calls, and then coming home and putting dad face on and dad hat. Again, my wife was a nurse, so there was a lot of times when we had our first daughter, I would get home, she'd go off and be gone for a 12-hour shift in the ER. And so now I'm watching a 2-year-old after being on a 48-hour shift, just getting my ass handed to me. Um, Not a great idea, right? And so I was tired. We realized this, like, I need sleep. Yeah, I shouldn't be watching the baby. We didn't have any family in that area. We
gotcha.
had some neighbors that helped. But my wife was lucky enough, she was able to change her schedule to not work on the day I got home so I could rest. And she would do her shifts in the middle of we worked the 4896. Um, so I would have 4 days off. She would work the 2 middle days, um, which really helped out. And if she picked up some overtime or something, it would be that last day. So yeah, so our schedule was great once we figured it out. But I noticed I started drinking more because I was remodeling our house at the same time and trying to keep busy and realizing what I was doing, not at the time, but if I was at home and it was quiet, my mind would go to those bad calls. And if I kept myself busy, I didn't have to think about those calls. And that's a problem, right? Because you can only, and one of those red flags I talked about, avoidance, so that was it. Um, and then when we moved, I got out of the fire service. I did handyman work thinking I'll do whatever to get by. I'm out of the fire service now, so I don't have to do that. What I didn't realize is I lost my identity. I identified as a firefighter and a paramedic, and not as a dad, not as a husband. And that was detrimental because when I lost the fire service, I lost my fire family. Now I had nothing, and I had trauma that I couldn't process.
I
Um,
think that's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I
yeah,
think that
no, that's good.
for a lot of us, um, once we realize we have the issues that we have from this
Yeah,
service,
right.
is you know I found out myself had PTSD, and that's why I started this whole podcast. And the losing, like you said, the family of leaving from offshore. I had a family of medics. I had a family on the ship that I dealt with every day, and it was just it felt so weird coming home and not being able to be the same person I thought I was because I was like you said, I took that identity on. I was a medic. I was the offshore medic. I wasn't someone else. And we I don't know if it's just our fields that do that or every field, but um, I we do identify as our jobs, and I think that's some of our biggest downfalls in
Yeah,
the well.
I totally agree. Um, and I think the military does that as well.
Right.
You know, because you're younger when you get into these careers. They are traumatic. One of those things when I work with someone in the military, that there's a saying in the Marines: "Once a Marine, always a Marine." Right, and that's a very proud statement. It's also a very dangerous statement, right?
A
And
little
I
bit.
know I have friends who are Marines. I worked with some, a bunch, and totally respect what they did and who they are. But you can't, like, you're told at that point, you're 18 years old, you're always going to be a Marine. And it's a pride thing, but I don't think they understand that it's a dangerous line when you are. And I was a firefighter. I was a paramedic. My whole life lived around it. And I think, honestly, I think a lot of people identify that, even, I'm sure there's some accountants out there. Like, I'm an accountant. I'm a salesman. I do sales. It's still dangerous because you're
Not your
anyone
job.
who identifies as a job. You're not a job. You're a human. You're a person. You do the work. You may love the work. You may be passionate about it. You're still, I'm still Darren. I'm a father of two teenage girls. I'm a husband. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what a lot of us miss in the end on the PTSD side of things is,
Yes.
we have our day to day that we don't realize is PTSD. And
Right.
then we look back on it as, holy shit, I just missed all of that.
Yeah. Right. And I think we're the worst at looking in the mirror too.
That's
Right.
true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
actually
that.
my next question for you is,
Yeah.
what did PTSD look like day to day to you? Not the textbook version, um, but at home, on shift, on the truck, or hell, even
Yeah.
at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're waking up like, crap, I remember that call. You know,
Yeah. Oh man, everywhere, right? All of that. But at home, like I said, I was short of my kids. Um, and uh with my wife, I was constantly tired, but I had to stay busy. And that's just right. I complain that I'm exhausted. I just want to sit. I don't want to, everything was too loud for me. I just noticed that all of a sudden, if I was in like crowds, I would just get anxious and need to leave. And I've never had that before. I used to be the guy in the crowd, and now I don't want anything to do with that. Um, so it showed up all of there. I had trouble sleeping. And honestly, I still have trouble sleeping. Um, you know, I'm always awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. Still to this day, most nights. Um, but what I would find is I could always fall asleep, um, for the most part, but I was always awake 2 or 3 in the morning thinking about that call and never being able to go back. back to sleep. There was a point actually earlier on where I would have a drink before bed, and that lead to 2, and then 4, and there was a short period where I'd drink myself to sleep, um, for the most part, and that's, it's humiliating to say, but it's the truth, and I didn't want my kids seeing that, my wife seeing that. Um, I started kind of hiding my drinking. Oh, no one's home. What's a quick shot? Um, and and uh, yeah, I would get home from one job that I had doing construction. I was building wood boats, which was honestly really cool. But I'd come home, take a
That
shower,
sounds
and
awesome.
it really was. It was a fun job. I did that for a while until they started doing layoffs. Um, like handmade wood boats. They were like incredible because I could zone out, and that was actually therapeutic in a way because you're doing a lot of sanding and like hand planing, um, where I could zone out for a little while and focus on a craft, which actually did help. But I'd get off work, come home, take a shower. I'd grab a shower beer. And then I'd go have another one. And then I'd have one, before dinner and then with dinner. And I just noticed I was more distant with my family. Like even eating dinner with my kids and my wife, I was physically there, but I don't know what they were talking about. I was staring at a wall. And all of that was just drifting away. My wife kept asking me, "Why can't you be happy?" And it took me so long to figure out what those words meant. And I would get kind of angry, like, you just don't, I'd throw blame, like, you're the reason we moved here and I can't, be a fireman anymore. And we chose this. And she's absolutely right. I mean, she is my biggest supporter, to be quite honest. Uh, which, looking back was all those little things. I would hear, um, we had a neighbor across the street when I was actually still a firefighter. Uh, there was she would call her kids in for dinner. And I remember running a horrific call with a child that had the same name as one of them, and that
Wow.
child died. And and it was probably the worst call I've ever been on. It was definitely top 3, if not the worst call I've ever been on. And so, yeah, that child had died. A lot of unanswered questions. Um, and I would hear her go out and just call him in for dinner. But what I heard was not her voice just calling him for dinner. I heard the other mother screaming that
Your
voice,
name.
you know, and we hear stories of like, and I was one, if I saw a hurt or, a deceased child, I saw my daughter's face on that child. So I had, I don't know if you want to call it a hallucination. I just saw like all of these things to realize like I can't do this job anymore. And that's why I left. And that followed me, up until I started getting help. So
I
yeah,
think
my
that's the
day
best.
today was just crazy at home. Um, day to day in the firehouse, you could mask it with humor. And I did. I masked it with humor. Um, I every now and then you'd pick up on somebody like, oh, maybe they're having a bad day, and that's it. And then you look back and like, I remember there was one time where our department was having 7 divorces at once,
Jeez.
um, active divorces, and so the department noticed it. And they actually did a great job. They brought in like a marriage counselor for like a catered dinner, and it just invited, hey, we're bringing this in just to go sit and listen, which was really cool. And actually, my wife and I went, um,
That is
which
pretty awesome.
it was really cool back then. And I have to, my hats off to this department. They've done a lot with mental health. But they did that. And it was right around the same time as I walked in on a trade or an overtime shift. So I'm working with a bunch of different guys. Um, and I was kind of, grumpy that morning. So I throwing out some jokes, and the lieutenant, who's a buddy of mine, picked up on it. complaining about, my wife, everyone does that, right? Uh, well, he called me in his office later that afternoon. He's like, "What's going on at home?" I'm like, "Oh," he's like, "Your comments. What's going on at home?" And so I sat down and talked. He's a friend of mine. We were medics together for a while, and uh, it was really good conversation. I could kind of let the guard off a little bit, and he recommended a book to read, and it's just because he had gone through a divorce, so he picked up on some of this stuff, right? He experienced it, so it was a good eye opener for me. Like, oh, I need to work on this. And then right around that time, the department had that thing with all those active divorces going on, and so it's little things that you can kind of pick up on that really it made me think a little bit more about it. But
And I
yeah,
think
every aspect of life, man.
I think you hit the nail on the head too earlier. Is the biggest part for all of us that are able to survive it is you got to have a good backbone. You have to have a good support system.
Yes.
Without that support system, you're not going to make it. And that's one thing that I've noticed of the suicides of people I know. That's where it fails is their spouses aren't supportive, their friends don't pay attention, um, and it I think in the end that comes to a head. And like I said in my earlier podcast, is pain is only a temporary thing. It may be a long process as you dealt with your whole life. I'm not trying to down
Right.
all, but
Right.
it is only temporary, and
Yeah.
you're taking a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That is not what you need to do.
Right. No, I totally agree. Um, yeah, it's crazy. And I completely agree with you on that. Um, Up here, there's actually involved. We've noticed a lot of issues in Coeur d'Alene. I don't know. There was an incident just over a year ago now where three firefighters were shot um,
Damn. Okay.
from a yeah. So somebody lit a wildland fire on purpose. They responded, and then he opened gunfire on them. Uh, Killed two, and seriously injured one who had to medically retire. Um, since then, the community, we're a small community. Um, a lot of PTSD stuff came out of that call, obviously, and um, a huge outpouring. Well, there was a bunch of trauma therapists that got together, and they had actually been planning this prior to, but this kind of ignited this team that they put together. Um, so there's a bunch of trauma therapists. It's a first responder clinician support team. Is basically what it is. Uh, so now they respond to they're in all of the firehouses, police stations in the five northernmost counties of Idaho right now, and branching into Washington actually. But what they do is they're involved in all the SISMs, all of the talks. They go in and visit the firehouses to get to know, or the sheriff stations, police stations, to get to know all the first responders. Put on a bunch of trainings. They'll do ride-alongs, and along with that, they have actually handpicked a bunch of mentors. And
That's cool.
so I was actually handpicked to be a mentor, um, as the intermediary, basically. So a lot of first responders don't want to talk to a therapist, right? We're not going to admit what we talk about at the kitchen table. Like that doesn't leave the firehouse a lot of times, right? Um, but people, the first responders can trust one of their own, right? And so they put this mentor group, and we were all handpicked, and we've all gone through therapy and had our incidents, and so they can contact us
That's cool.
for support, and we become their backbone, so to speak, right? Um, so there's several firefighters, several police officers, some ex-military, both men and women. And then my wife is actually on the team as the spouse of the first responder. So
That
now they've opened it up to the spouses. Yeah, which is really cool because quite honestly, the spouses go through just as much trauma as the person, if not more, right? I put my wife through hell. She had to keep
No,
right. She had to keep the family together, be the wife, be my backbone and help our kids and work a full-time job. So, um, yeah, the spouses need it too. So a program like that is incredible, and it's really successful so far.
that's amazing, and I think
Yeah,
you touched on what I think as well as I don't think we give the spouses of first responders, um, the kudos or the praise,
right.
that they
And they
honestly
need to.
deserve. We as first responders beat the hell out of them,
Right.
and they didn't sign up for this.
No.
They willingly deal with our bullshit day in, day out, and even if we don't notice, like you were saying earlier, the beginning of the PTSD is you're blowing up at people. You're always so easily angriated that it it affects your family, and they're still there by your side the whole time. So kudos to all of y'all out there.
Yeah, thanks. It's such a cool program. I'm hoping it goes worldwide. You know,
That would be
uh,
fantastic.
there's other larger departments looking at that model, and it's still new, but it's incredible, and it doesn't take place of peer support. Everyone has their peer support teams. It builds on it and with it, and I think that's important, right? Because we know, I mean, some departments have a great peer support, other departments don't.
Yeah,
That's
it's either good
unfortunate.
or it's not.
Right, right. And I have a buddy who's a cop. He was a firefighter, now a cop, and he's struggling. And he'll call me, he'll call other people, but he's like, their peer support team, the wrong people are in it, and it's dangerous that way. Unfortunately, right? Um, I I think it's a great thing to have, but just like anything, they can all be better, right? Every program could get better, and and education up the ranks, and acceptance of mental health, up the ranks. I think departments are getting very good at it and better now that it's out there more. Um, but I think there's still a handful of higher ranks that are still in the rub some dirt on it, suck it up, kid. This is the job mentality.
Yeah, and that's another problem. And one thing I kind of want to bring up too before we get too far away from this is how, from your perspective, you've been doing this now for, like you said, over a year of being a coach. How can a spouse, partner, or even a coworker or a partner on the trucks approach someone who's clearly changing without making them shut down or get on the defensive?
Right. That's difficult, right? It's very difficult. Um, but offering support, um, as best you can, maybe bringing somebody else in that they trust. A lot of times when a spouse brings something up, because they're so close, it's easiest to argue with the person you love most. And that's weird, right? But it's ironic, but it's true. Maybe someone else you respect enough that you don't have that as much closeness with, but someone who's walked through your shoes or walked through it together. So bringing in other peers, um, and it's different for everyone, and that's the hardest part. But I think someone who's searching for help, and that's another thing, is they have to want the help. That's step one. They have to want it. And some people go, you go at different speeds. I took years to ask for help. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Harder than running in a burning building, harder than telling a parent their child has died. That's difficult. Like it sounds so stupid, but it was true in my case. Um, when they're ready, bringing someone in, and there's support teams out there. There's coaching. All of this is out there. It's just asking for it and just finding that resource, um, and really just accepting it. I don't know if that answers it, but
It does.
it's true. You gotta want the help. You're not the only one that's going through it. There's the statistics are honestly insane. Um, they say roughly 30% of first responders have PTSD. I've read other studies that say more likely double it because those are the ones who admit it.
Yeah, I've read a study once. I think it said 80%.
Yeah, I would honestly buy 60 to 80% have signs, right? Um, and it's it's insane, and it's getting worse with you know budget cuts and busier trucks, right? And so you're getting worn out faster. Um, and we go on different calls now. Like active shooters were not a common thing, and when I was in Denver, unfortunately, Colorado was like the active shooter capital of the country
Yeah,
for a long time. And
I remember that one.
yeah, and horrific. I was on one, which wasn't any of the major ones. Um, and it honestly was a little terrifying because I was the first medic in. I was pinned down behind a vehicle taking care of a patient who had been shot numerous times. Um, so you don't, that's not common. I understand that, but it's still like that kind of ruins your day for a while, right? And um those stressors weren't out there as often as, back in the 80s and 90s and or before, when some of that leadership is now at the top. We're expected to do more than they were.
Right. And I think that's kind of where the old culture kind of treats try to come back is, shut the hell up, keep working, shove it down. And they confuse, in my opinion, they can seem to confuse resiliency with that. And, there is a big difference between resiliency and you shutting up and keeping it going.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think those services, you have to have some mental toughness. You do. Um, but you can also be human, and asking for help is okay. And getting a person support, because, and you said earlier, like, the last thing we want is someone to go to a dark spot and end their life all because they were too scared to ask for help or didn't even know they could. Um, and that's a dark, dark spot to be in for a long time.
So I know you said you figured out the PTSD after you got out of the service or
Yeah.
out of the fire service. I mean, not service, but um, so would you have been scared to have approached your leadership with this? I kind of have a feeling on this that if we as responders go to captains, lieutenants, whatever, they're going to wind up pulling us off the trucks. They're going to wind up pulling us off the job, and that's another thing that I think needs to be fixed in the end on that as well. If you don't mind me asking you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I, again, I didn't know I had it.
Right.
However, there were people that you could see, but there was always, I had a partner for a while. He would joke, but I also know, um, like, he has some mental health stuff going on, and we would say, like, "Oh, you admit this? I'm off. I'm out of a job. I'm off the truck." You know, um, and it's just it's sad to have a fear because you worked so hard. It is your career, um, and I will say the department I was at was very good and now is very good at it. But we had, there was one time they had put out when we went to the 4896 schedule years ago, that if the medics got beat up overnight or certain houses just got beat up, you could swap with another crew to get a little bit of sleep. Um, and there was one, like, series of weeks that we were working just nonstop beat up, and that this whole day I can't even remember how many calls or what calls I ran all day, but in the middle of the night, we were on a call, and I went and we were running with a different station engine. And I went to the engine lieutenant and said, I need a break. I can't even concentrate on this call. Can you swap me out? Um, and he said, yeah, go to this, run this call and go to this firehouse and we'll bring this other medic up. Which was great. We did that. Next set, I got a bunch of shit. Can you handle it, buddy? Are you too tired? These are from my brothers. And they're busting my balls, and
Right.
some of the guys get it,
Sometimes it hurt. It hits you
but
differently when it comes from your people.
exactly. And the thing is, I mean, there's always the Monday morning quarterback, and some of the upper level chiefs on different in shifts, like, oh, well, so this happened, and they may blow it out of proportion. Like, well, I'm not ever sending one of my medics home. And certain scenarios, you'd have that Monday morning quarterback. Like, well, B shift did this. Well, C shift's never doing that. And that's coming from a leader. And then when you have a rookie in there or a younger guy in there, um, they're learning that attitude, and not great. I know, again, in the fire service, and I feel like they are better at it than the law enforcement group, at accepting the mental health. From what, in my personal opinion, what I've seen and what I've heard around the areas, uh, my hope is that it gets better. Because quite honestly, I feel like law enforcement has more eyes on them and is more stressed than
Yeah, just a little.
than fire. So,
Yeah, just a little.
yeah,
And so I wish they would actually start training more, in the academies or recruit schools about the mental health. The bad calls, the actual fatigue from the mental fatigue you're going to wind up with from this job. Do you agree that they should be teaching that more in schools?
absolutely, yeah, they do. And I've heard that some are better, but
It is getting
actually,
better, but
it it's so needed. It used to be a 30-minute class in a 500-hour academy. you know, that's not enough. Um, and it's probably on day one, and you're just not learning anything yet on day one. So I do know, like, even with my coaching, I have reached out to a lot of some departments, actually fairly recently, offering to speak to their academies and at their trainings as part of my motivational speaking stuff that I'm doing through coaching as well, is speaking at these, specifically contacting and trying to get in with local departments in their academy.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what would a properly funded wellness program include beyond this stupid, godforsaken posters on a bulletin board?
Right. I like how you put that. Yeah. um, yeah. Well, it's total body wellness, right? A lot of departments are putting in gyms. Great. Put in fitness centers, put in gyms. I know some that are putting in saunas.
Wow.
There's actually a ton of studies on sauna and cold therapy, like cold plunging, um, for stress relief and uh, for stress relief, but also especially saunas as detoxifying. So as you're actually sweating and getting those toxins that you are in all day, every day, it actually helps with that. So some departments are putting in saunas along with gyms, but the missing component is the mental health, because the body is just that. If you are not mentally healthy, you're not physically healthy either, right? You can look physically fit, you can run and do all that, but you're not. The whole body's a system, and it all works together, right? Um, so I think just as much funding needs to be in the mental health, and it could be simply bring in a therapist now and then, or offer better than just EAP and peer support.
Right. And I
Get
think that's the biggest.
guys off shift, Um, I do know, I mean, some are looking into, some do better than others, I can say, but it's still not the norm, right? And until I feel like it has to get up to, you know, into the union a little bit more. Maybe that's the way it goes. But also, I mean, stuff like this takes time, and I understand it, but uh, at least start now so it's out there and put the money where it needs to be, because not every department needs a shiny new truck for, you know, for a chief that doesn't show up on calls, right?
True. Um, so how do schedules, sleep, staffing, you pretty much covered this just now, but how does schedule, sleep, staffing, and mandatory overtime feed the mental health problem?
Man, yeah, absolutely. It feeds it, right?
It does.
um, it does. You know, I've worked in the industry long enough. I've been on two different common schedules. Um, and the 4896, I was against it when we went it, but I learned to love it. The problem with it is you are up 48 hours sometimes. That's insane. Um, trying to take care, what I think doesn't happen is, in a lot of departments, if they have transport units, medics, um, that medic unit is running with other stations as well. They're at the hospital longer. It's not like we used to we used to joke with our truckies all the time, right? They get up, they show up, they pick something up, and then they go home and go to bed, right? um, that doesn't always happen with the team, and so it does feed it. I mean, there's thousands of studies documenting sleep is important, and it feeds directly to mental health. Diet, nutrition has to be there. I feel like nutrition is better on the fireside now. It used to be just big spaghetti dinners all the time, and it's gotten better. But for law enforcement, they're stuck in a car, not moving much, going through drive-throughs. It's terrible with the stress and all the mandatory overtimes. Um, Staffing models, I don't know how to change it. Hire more. There's some departments that are actually putting on 4 shifts or 4 platoon um, shifts. The studies that I've read on that is actually it's better. So you're 1 day on, 3 days off. Um, a lot of the documentation on PTSD is related to PTSD is your brain takes 24 to 48 hours to process a trauma, to start to process. So if you're experiencing those and you're that 1 on 2 off shift, you just started processing before you're getting back to work. And so you're dysregulated. Um, so I think different shifts, different hours, um, but all of it does contribute to mental health. And so that's why we need a buffer in there to at least accept, if we're going to run these shifts, what are we going to do to mental health?
So you introduced yourself as a family man first, husband, father, 2 daughters, outdoorsman, coach, and advocate. That can't speak today. And someone with one hell of a dark sense of humor, which is awesome. That order you said it in matters. Yes, I wrote that down earlier.
That's awesome.
But how does Darren, the husband and the father, show up differently now than he did during the worst years?
That's a great question, by the way. I am 100% a husband and a father first. My family is everything. I saw the damage I did. I am trying to undo what I can. And I'm also very aware that there's some damage I can't undo. And I regret that every day. But I can be the best father from today on, um, the best husband from today on. And I show up to all of they're both my daughters are gymnasts. I'm at every gymnastics tournament event. I'm involved with their lives because they get one father, and I was absent for some of that time. Um, you know, speaking to guys who love and live their job, and there's nothing wrong with loving and living their job, but it's a job. Family comes first. And so now yeah, you can replace a job, can't replace a person, right? And we are all taught that. You can replace a roof, you can replace a ladder, you can replace a truck. You're not replacing a person. So, um, that's who I am now. And I want to be an example, kids, right? I didn't have a great I had very little example growing up from my father until my stepfather came into my life many years later. Kids need that. I knew I needed that, and I want to be that for my kids and my wife. Right? I want to be as healthy as I can. I want to be around as long as I can. I want to see them walk down the aisle. I want to see grandchildren. I want to see great grandchildren. So I have to be healthy, and that, you know, by me being healthy, they'll follow suit.
Apologize for the version of you that survived.
Yeah. Um, I've I've apologized to my family profusely all the time. Um, and I apologize to myself. You know, I am I'm a completely different person than I was before. I still have the fun jokes. I still, I can be that, but I also left that version behind. And truly, firefighter Darren is dead. And I mean that the
The dark.
dark inside is gone. Through therapy, through help, that part of me is gone. Um, and I'm very aware that I won't ever go back to that dark place. The place I was in was so dark, so cold, so scary that I can't go back there. Right. Um, yeah. So now it's just encouraging. And that's honestly, man, that's why I coach. That's why I want to see people rise. I want to give everything I can to help people get out of where they're at and overcome their challenges or, overcome whatever they need. Um, but the apology had to start with my entire family and then to myself.
Gotcha. So before I close up, I like doing that. This is something I just started doing with the past few podcasts. I got a few quick hit questions. This is the first thing that comes to your mind after I ask.
All right, let's do it.
So, what is the biggest lie PTSD tells?
Biggest lie that I'm fine, that I'm okay.
Biggest lie burnout tells?
These are tough. Probably the same. It's uh yeah, that that I'm fine, that I've got this, right?
So, one word for healing.
It's self-acceptance.
What does real resilience look like?
That's going to tie into self-acceptance too. Understanding who you are, um, and being able to rise and get up. But you have to know who you are, what you know, who you are first before you can do that, before you can be resilient. But know that you don't have limits.
Yeah, very true. So, what should every firehouse stop saying?
Suck it up, kid. This is the way it is.
What should every firehouse start asking?
What do you need? How can I serve you?
I got two more for you. So,
All
can
right.
people rebuild after they lose the job, the identity, or part of themselves? And you are proof of this, that they can. But I want your opinion.
Yes, they absolutely can. Um, and you can come back a better, stronger version.
Perfect. So, what still makes you laugh when life gets heavy?
I can still laugh about really anything. I can laugh at myself. I think I can definitely laugh at myself. Um, it's that self-ownership. Once you figure out who you are, and accept all the bad that happened and turn it into good and laugh all the way, you know.
Always improve.
Always improve. Yeah, exactly.
So, Darren, picture the responder you described earlier. Alone at 2 in the morning, isolated, using alcohol or drugs to shut everything off, convinced nobody would understand what the hell they're asking for, what they need, and that help would cost just too much. You know what silence can cost. You also know what it means to rebuild after being an old life and gone. What does that person need to hear from you after listening to this today before they make another decision alone?
That you are not alone. A lot of people have gone through this. There are so many people that can help. And all you have to do is ask for it or accept. If someone is trying to help you, just accept it. Life is so much better when you let that in. Um, and we've all been down that dark spot. And really, there's two ways out of it. And one is the way to get out. And that's just accepting and asking for help. One's permanent, and you don't want to go that road.
Exactly. So if people want to learn more about you or follow your work, or learn more about coaching, get coaching from you, um, or hell, just reach out and say to bullshit with you. How or where would they go for that?
Yeah, so I have a website. My company name is Ashes to Ascent Coaching. Um, just search the internet ashes2ascent.com.
I'll
I'm
put
on
links as well.
okay, on Instagram. And my email is Darren at ashes2ascent.com. And yeah, for anybody just who's struggling, wants to do mindset, resilience, mental performance coaching. I offer that. I offer group coaching, motivational speaking. If your department wants a speaker or an event of any kind, I'd be happy to do that. Or like you said, if you're struggling and need to reach out, send me an email. I'd love to talk with you.
Thank you for that. And that means a lot.
Yeah. And I do offer, so one thing I wanted to mention, I do offer discounts for coaching for first responders and veterans. So if you think it's too expensive, there's a hefty discount because my heart is truly in it.
You lived it. You've been through it.
I
You know
have.
what we're going through. And that to me is something that will build more trust. As you said earlier, I've always wanted to go back to therapist school, but ain't no way in hell I can afford it. So,
Right. This is a lot cheaper than therapy.
well, thank you for being honest
Yeah.
about the parts that would have been easier to turn into a polished, resiliency speech. Thank you for being here. I really appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I had a great time. I love doing this. So yeah, if anyone needs help, reach out. And I had a blast. It was a lot of fun, Chris.
Thank you. Hit stop. If this thing
If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.